And with me today, I'm joined by Hannah Shewan Stevens, who's an award-nominated freelance journalist and creative, traveling the world as a digital nomad while tackling the stories others shy away from. Specializing in sex, relationships, health, and travel, her work dives deep into the intersections of disability, trauma, chronic illness, LGBTQ plus issues, and mental health. Hannah is passionate about amplifying underreported stories from the economic impact of violence against women and girls to the hidden realities of living with chronic conditions. If a topic makes people uncomfortable, Hannah doesn't shy away. She starts the conversation. Welcome to the show, amazing Hannah. I absolutely love what you're about. This is
Thank
fantastic.
you.
Proper
Nice
victim
to be
to
here.
victim. Yeah. You're well suited to this podcast.
Yes, it feels like it.
So Hannah, I mean, I absolutely enjoyed our, discussion and the article that was published in the Glamour magazine about the hidden cost of sexual violence, breaking the silence. So tell us, what was it that led you to write about such important topics?
Beyond my personal experience, I think the economic side of things really came out because I was getting really frustrated with how hard it is to place stories about these things in the media. People just aren't willing to go deep into these issues. They either want to sensationalize it or they just want to gloss over it. And I really thought, okay, what's the thing that most people care about? And that's money. So I decided to kind of really do a bit of a deep dive into what sexual violence of all kinds is actually costing our society and was horrified by what I found. Both the impact on the broader economy, but most importantly on the survivors themselves and the amount of money that they are spending to recover from something that wasn't their fault in the first place. And as someone who I was a victim of childhood sexual abuse myself, between the ages of 7 and 9. And then, because of that, over time, also experienced other abusive situations. So, I kind of understanding how much money I'd spent on surviving abuse, I realized that I'm definitely not the only one. So, that's kind of what led me down that particular path with that story. And that's how we
Wow.
met.
No, yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. And it normally is from personal experiences, which, we then have the drive and we then lead our lives with purpose, having to overcome not only what we went through, but to then be the light and guiding star for others as well. So I just think it's fantastic, what you're doing, the fact that you're sharing so much now to help other survivors. Because let's face it, so many survivors are still suffering in silence.
Yeah. And I
Mm.
think it's the kind of tragically beautiful thing I've learned in covering all of this more is that the people who are doing the most work in this area are the people who've been most harmed by abuse and by sexual violence. And I think it's frustrating because we shouldn't be the only ones in this realm doing that amount of work. This is a problem largely caused by men, and they should be taking the lead in this, and they're not. But then also the beautiful side of it is seeing how many survivors use their experience to then go forward and help other people because they want to empower others to recover in the same way they have, or they want to kind of use their voice to highlight the impact of this on their lives. And I think that's been, like I said, the most kind of tragically beautiful thing about covering these things is I've met so many people like you who are using their experiences for good and choosing to then go forth and raise awareness and try and reverse this tide of abuse that we're living with. Um, but then also it gives birth to this frustration of we should not be the only ones who are doing this. Like it should be the perpetrators of this violence who and the abettors of this violence who should be the ones doing the most work. Um, so yeah, that should be the next phase is hopefully trying to push more people who are not just the victims and survivors to be doing this work.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, what was like the most surprising or challenging discovery while you were researching for your articles?
Ooh. Um, I think a really big statistic that stuck with me was when I was working. I did a piece for Glamour and I also did a piece for Metro, and I mentioned this statistic in both stories that just in the year ending March 2019, childhood sexual abuse cost the British economy over £10 billion.
Wow.
Um, And that's not just uh, judicial cost or the cost of imprisoning offenders, it's also rehabilitation, it's the cost on survivors themselves, and it's an estimation of how much economic loss we've made from survivors unable to earn up to their potential. And that's really stuck with me, and particularly the fact that on top of that, if you then look more broadly at the cost of sexual violence, we are looking at probably more like 40 to 60 billion a year that we're losing to sexual violence against women. And it realizing those statistics and then realizing that no one's talking about those numbers.
Mm.
We're only talking about how we all know the numbers of, like 97% of people have experienced sexual harassment, so of women have experienced sexual harassment. We know that 1 in 4 children will be victims of childhood sexual abuse. We're not talking about the real financial impact that this is having. And obviously, the most important impact is on survivors. But I think what really hit me was that this is a crisis for our economy. So even if you don't care or don't believe women, you should care that this is harming our broader society. We are losing of like growth and development of our country because we are not confronting sexual violence. So I think that those statistics really hit home for me when I was researching these stories and kind of I guess it's almost impossible. And I say it in the glamour piece, like it's almost impossible to put an accurate number to the cost of these things.
Mm.
But having an estimate like that really puts things into perspective and makes you go, okay, this is not just a emotional and spiritual cost being incurred on survivors. This is a real economic cost, both to our lives in terms of lost income, the money we spend on recovery, and then it's also hugely affecting our society's like income with, the amount of money we're spending on social care to support survivors, the money we're spending on rehabilitating perpetrators. Like there's just so many costs that we're not paying attention to.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and I'm just thinking as well, it's all the hidden costs as well, like the chronic illnesses that
Yeah.
occur as a result of complex trauma, because that's something which obviously is coming out a lot in the limelight now is, that trauma causes, cancer, trauma causes so many different chronic conditions, which again will be costing the NHS so much money. But it's hard to then factor that into these costs. So,
Yeah.
I feel like it's going to be much more really when you're thinking about it.
100%. I think that because that's something those are kind of article topics that I'm really working on researching at the moment is that we don't realize the health impact that trauma can have, particularly if you are abused in childhood, the lifetime impact on your health is unreal, and we don't talk about that aspect of it. And like you say, those costs are not factored into the figures that I just quoted. So if we're really adding that in, we're probably looking at 20 billion pounds more minimum on the
Wow.
health impact that this is having. Probably more because if you think about it, if someone develops a disability, which means they can't work full time, the government is then spending that money to support that person, as they should, because
Yeah.
we live in a democratic society. But
Mm.
if we are able to get back to the root and prevent that abuse from happening in the first place, or providing the right support after that happens, then we are minimizing the chances of someone becoming chronically ill or disabled by their illnesses. Um, and again, that's something that happened to me. Like I have multiple chronic health issues that I believe all stem from the abuse that I experienced and the stress and the trauma that that inflicted on my body. Like one of the two kind of most disabling things I have are chronic pain issues, which were caused by the constant kind of physical stress of being abused and the tension that you live with as a result of that. And again, those are things that we're not really confronting. We're seeing it as well with adult survivors who experience abuse and then develop chronic pain or stress or mental health issues afterwards. And because the support isn't in place, we're just letting these people fall through the cracks. And then again, that has this full-on knock-on effect where we're constantly losing money. Like we're investing in our own recovery constantly. I know people who spent hundreds of thousands on trying to recover from abuse. And then not only that, but then we're not contributing to the economy in the way that we could if we were given the support we needed to recover from what we've experienced. We're just kind of left to flounder in
It's
in the ether.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, so that was going to be my next question. So beyond the direct costs like therapy and legal fees, so how does sexual violence actually affect a survivor's long-term financial stability and career?
Yeah, well, there's so many layers to it because I think, number one, you've got the very obvious factor of if you are traumatized, you are going to be less economically productive. You are not going to be able to maintain a job as easily. So you're more likely to hop between jobs, which means you're not going to have as much financial stability. You're not going to be able to reach your earning potential. For example, one of the people I spoke to in my Metro story about this, specifically about childhood abuse, she says that she feels like she's constantly limiting her earning potential because she has all these deep-rooted beliefs about her self-worth. So she's not able to push as much as she would like to because she doesn't think she deserves to be there. So it's little things like that can have a huge impact. And then secondary to that, you've got the fact that if you are traumatized or if you've experienced any kind of trauma like that or instability, you are less likely to be able to navigate finances. You're not going to be able to control or manage your money in the way that maybe you should have done because you don't have the stability, particularly if you develop addiction issues, which people who are survivors of abuse are significantly more likely to do. Um, yes, there's so many factors in that. So you're more likely to lose time, work time, because you might be mentally ill or physically ill, so you might need to take more time off work. There's so many factors. Like it's not just, I think, a lot of us are aware of the fact that recovery costs money, like mental health therapy costs money, but we don't think about it in terms of, okay, how is this actually affecting our economic output? How are we able to work the way that we should? For me, I know that I haven't reached the highs of the career I am capable of doing because of the health impact that all this trauma has had on me and the time that I've had to take out for mental health. It all adds up, and I don't really want to figure out how much money I've lost, but it's probably significant. And I think a lot of survivors probably feel the same.
True, yeah. So, what role should policymakers and institutions actually play in easing this burden?
Oh, that's such a complicated question. But there's so many things I think they can do. I think I've talked about this a lot in articles before that
Mm,
rightly so, we've got a lot of focus on prevention.
yeah.
We're still not quite doing as well as we should be doing in that realm, but we also need to be investing heavily in support network after the fact.
Mm,
Um, you know, as a childhood survivor of abuse, I reported my abuse and then was encouraged not to bother pursuing criminal charges because they didn't think that they said it'll be your word against theirs. But then after that, I was never contacted again. I was never given any opportunity to take it further. I was never given any opportunity for support, and neither was my family. My family, my mum is an amazing woman as a teacher, and she had been given training to kind of spot abuse, but she had no idea how to support a survivor. She wasn't given any like resources to help her. So I think a really big factor is we need to be creating resources that go into the community and focus on empowering families who are around the support system around child survivors of abuse so that they're able to help that child grow in the most functional way possible. Like just saying, once you've reported it, we're done. Or even making it the child or the family's responsibility to seek therapy, I think is a failure. I think the focus needs to be on proactively going out and offering like therapy and support networks to these people. So I think in terms of policy, it needs to be heavy investment in mental health support, particularly therapy that's trauma focused and trauma informed. Like cognitive behavioral therapy is not going to do it for a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I can attest to that myself. Um, and then also creating community networks and support groups for the families around the survivors, and I think also that extends to adult survivors of any sort of sexual violence. I think we're so focused on the prevention or the judicial process, and even that's failing survivors. Um, we're not thinking about, okay, long term, how are we going to then help this person recover enough that they can be the best version of themselves and contribute as much as possible to our wider society? So I think our policy needs to take a bit of a shift. Actually, no, just needs to. needs to exist in this realm. Like I said, if you look at most policy around violence against women and girls, it's all about prevention. You know, Labour's policy of we want to halve violence against women and girls by 2040 is an admirable goal, and I really hope we achieve it. But there are still going to be a lot of victims in that time, and we're not doing anything really to support them. Um, so I think that needs to be a huge focus in figuring out community support networks and therapies that will actively help these people recover. Um, so I don't have the perfect answer, but I think, primarily it just needs to be we need to actually do something to help people after the fact.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. And so, from your obviously research and personal perspective, what kind of support do survivors need in the immediate aftermath? Because I know like long term is
Yeah.
therapy, isn't it? But how
I
about
think in the immediate aftermath, it's having listening, active listeners who are there to support that survivor and not make it a matter of, oh, we believe you or we don't believe you. You know, I almost wish there was a middle ground between experiencing the abuse and reporting because if you are choosing to report any instance of sexual violence, you are going from the raw emotion of experiencing that thing to sitting in a police room or talking to a social worker who is going to grill you about what's happened to you. And I think it's such a traumatizing thing to go through. Like, I still have flashbacks of the conversation I had with my social worker as much as I do about the abuse itself, because it was such a traumatizing experience. Um, and I think there needs to be some sort of middle ground where we create a safe space for survivors to just go and talk and to have someone listen to you. I mean, I know like all my friends who've been through, which is unfortunately all of them because women, um, have all said that one of the most empowering things for them was having someone say, I hear you, I believe you, like just let it out. So I think we need to kind of create some sort of middle ground. Like I know we've got a lot of charities out there who are providing online support and giving more of that kind of emotional to support to survivors, but I think they need to be given the funding that they need to roll that out to more people and also to increase awareness. Like I know loads of people who've gone through abusive situations who had no idea where to go for support. So I think that needs to be introduced from a really young age that if anything happens, it needs to be in educations at school, that if anything happens to you, these are the support services you can access. Um, but yeah, primarily I think we just need to figure out middle ground support groups and community opportunities that allow survivors to share their experiences before they get to the kind of the glaring light of a police room.
Oh yeah, it is. It's so intimidating, especially when
Mhm.
you've just it's just happened to you and then you're being grilled and in a way, I guess, that's probably where the self-blame starts as well, because when you're being so grilled without having like a caring kind of, nature around you because, at the end like because I've also been questioned and it's like a very investigative kind of procedure and really what you want is to be nurtured and to be hugged and told it wasn't your fault,
Yeah.
it's okay
But
but
we need
it
that kind of
isn't.
middle ground where because you jump straight from this happening to you to having to justify why that it happened and that it wasn't your fault. So we need
Yeah,
something in the middle that allows survivors a safe space to be like, we hear you, we believe you, we're going to listen to you, we want to comfort you, and then when you're ready, then you can go into that like procedure where you're going to be grilled.
exactly, and then the note taken, oh god.
God,
So
yeah.
yeah.
It's so
Oh,
impersonal. It's like it just feels like they're not really even listening to you.
yeah, just writing notes, it's like I know, I remember that, like what a police officer, he was writing like pages and pages of like notes about what happened, thinking, is that really necessary?
Yeah.
Hello, traumatized there.
Because they don't even make, I yeah, my social worker did the same, like they weren't even making eye contact with me. It just felt so impersonal. And I was kind of like, I'm already a really vulnerable child. This is not the way to deal with this.
Oh my goodness. Oh, bless. I mean, yeah, I mean, I was an adult when this happened, but
Mm.
yeah, I can imagine what it's like as a child as well. So, wow. And like you touch a lot about, how trauma cycles through every
Mhm.
part of a survivor's life as well. So, can you actually speak to that ripple effect and how it actually manifests?
Yeah, it's definitely something I've experienced myself in terms of, particularly I think when you're abused from a very young age, the abuse, the grooming for me started when I was 7, and that it literally, trauma like that literally rewires your brain and changes your neural pathways and how you interact with the world. So it's inevitable, really, that if you experience that from a young age, it's going to warp your understanding of sex and safety. So for me, I didn't know what consent meant. I didn't know that I had consent, that I could say no to someone touching my body. So when I got to the age where you were exploring with people your own age and your own peers, I was very easily manipulated and abused again. My first sexual experience after the abuse as a child was also non-consensual because I didn't know that I was able to say no. And then I also, as is very normal again for teenage girls, was dating people significantly older than me. So I was being kind of inducted into sexual environments that I was not ready for. And it kind of creates this kind of constant cycle. And then, as I got older, I was in another abusive relationship that was really like manipulative and sexually abusive. And it just kind of creates this like cycle of what feels like inevitability. Um, it had a huge impact on my mental health, I think, when I left that abusive relationship, because I remember thinking, okay, so is this my whole life? Am I just always going to get stuck in relationships or sexual dynamics that are abusive because I'm not able to protect myself? Um, or are all people just inherently abusive and I'm just never going to escape this? And I had such a huge, I had a breakdown kind of in 2020 due to that. And I think it's a cycle that we often, I don't know how to explain it. I think it's the cycle that most often leads to victim blaming because I think we see a child grow up and go, oh, well, they really loose and they don't have any respect for themselves. And oh, if it happens to them so many times, then surely it's their fault. Like they're putting themselves in this situation. And it festers that blame in yourself that you put all of the responsibility on yourself. And I think for me, particularly because of the nature of the abuse and my abuser, which is very common amongst paedophiles, would ask me if it was okay, to make me feel like I had a choice in what was happening to me, um, which is very common because they'll use it to kind of trick the child into thinking, and then it makes the child less likely to actually tell anyone because they think that they've consented to this, even though they don't understand what consent is. And I think because of that kind of root, that foundation for me, it meant that whenever anything violent or sexually manipulative did happen to me, my default was it's my fault and I am responsible for this and the guilt lies with me. And I think that is a cycle that can feel impossible to escape as a survivor, um, which is why I think so much more needs to be done in the aftermath of abuse because we are just beyond reporting and then maybe giving them some cognitive behavioral therapy. We're not really giving survivors the chance to regrow and what I personally needed, I needed consent education. I needed someone to repeatedly tell me it wasn't my fault. I needed to be deprogrammed from being this kind of easily manipulated, groomed child, because that turned into an easily manipulated, groomed teenager and then an easily manipulated adult. And I had to do all of that work myself to undo that cycle. And it's only really in the last like 6 years, 5 years that I have been successfully able to fully escape that. It's been kind of stages. Um, and I think that's the most tragic part, I guess, of being a survivor is that it can feel like you are trapped in this cycle that you cannot escape. Um, and it shouldn't be only your responsibility to break that cycle. I think there needs to be so much more support in allowing survivors to become the victors they want to be and to be able to move on from that abuse and build a life that is not based on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Oh my goodness, absolutely. And so, in terms of actually breaking the cycle, that would be through again, just deep understanding
Yeah.
and,
And kind of
acceptance.
deprogramming
Yeah.
because I mean I think every childhood abuse survivor will probably tell you the same thing that you kind of it completely changes how your brain works.
Yeah.
And if you're not given access to therapies or support that actually helps you undo all of that, you get stuck in that kind of programming.
You do. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Which is
Amazing.
why
Yeah,
I'm
I
such a
think.
fierce proponent of consent education from as young as humanly possible. As soon as
uh,
that child is able to speak, they should be being told, "This is your body. If you want to say no, you say no."
That's true. Yeah, and again, you just hit home on some really important points there. I mean, the fact that you were kind of asked, at such a young age,
Hmm.
to con and it was your choice, and obviously, we don't know any better, so we're going to say yeah because
Yeah.
there might be some fear there. We might feel that it's the only thing to do. Do you think, like, in your case, was it fear, or did you feel like intimidated?
Yeah, I think for me it was very much. I mean, the person who groomed me, he was a straight up psychopath. I always describe seeing the first time his like mask slipped
Wow.
as like it felt like watching a movie where you see like the psychopath like remove like the happy like kind face, and I remember f after seeing that, the idea of ever saying no to this person was too terrifying.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then I think because of that, later on, I had the same feeling in any situation where I wasn't fully comfortable. The fear was if I say no in this moment, is something more violent going to happen? So I think I ended up repeating that pattern in a lot of other sexual and romantic situations because I didn't know how to extricate myself from that because the fear was so overwhelming.
Yeah, yeah, and it's learned behavior as well, and
Yeah.
I can totally relate to that. Being, I just thought that it was just something that we just did, and we didn't even there was no in the equation. If somebody wanted you, then that was it. You just give yourselves to them.
Yeah. And there's
Yeah.
no choice because as a child, you don't understand choice like that. You
Mm.
are, particularly if you've been groomed in that way, there's no real understanding of, oh, I can walk away from the situation or I can go and tell someone. Because particularly because of the way they, pedophiles in particular are very good at getting children to think that they're like special friends and this is just a thing between us. Um, and then unfortunately, that also is often mimicked in really abusive relationships where the person makes you feel like, oh, I can't tell anyone else this because they're not going to understand.
Yeah, very
Mm.
true. Yeah. So, what do you think are some common misconceptions that people have about how survivors should heal or to move forward?
Oh, so many.
Yeah.
Um, I think a big one for me is often the misunderstanding about or the stereotypes about how sexuality develops after abuse. That, oh, well, if you've been abused, why would you ever want to, why are you having sex with lots of people? Or why are you like loose as or promiscuous as they would say. Like I got a lot of that because I had the reaction of hypersexuality after childhood abuse, which is more common than people want to admit. And because of that, I became very hypersexual, and I thought the only way to get love or worth was through sex. And then I would get constantly criticized for being such a slut and not it was almost like, oh, well, you've been abused, so you should be a hermit who never touches another man or person again, because I'm queer. Um, and it's very frustrating because you then, especially as a young person, you don't feel like you have a lot of defense against that standpoint. You can't, I didn't, when I was 16, I didn't know what hypersexuality was. I didn't know how to explain that abuse had like impacted how I interacted with other people sexually. And I think also another big one, I think, is the fact that people think that the trauma recovery is linear and that once you've done the therapy and you've done the work, you're fine for the rest of your life. And that frustrates me because it's not like that. The smallest thing can set you back, particularly if you develop PTSD or complex PTSD, which is more likely to happen with prolonged or sustained abuse, which is what I have. I have complex PTSD. And there wasn't just a day I woke up and I was okay again. There are still days where something will trigger me and I will be really affected by that. And then I might have to take a few steps back and then start climbing those stairs again. But people can be very impatient and just expect you to be okay. Once you've done some in-depth therapy, then you should be fine. Or people, and this is it can often be there's a lot of parallels with chronic illness as well that people kind of want you to stop talking about it and they kind of want you to just get over it and be like, well, why are we still talking about this? Why is this still a thing? And chronic pain is very similar, which is frustrating because they so often intertwine, is that people don't want to hear about your pain. So I think there is this expectation that at some point you will get over it and then you will shut up. And I won't do that. I don't want to do that.
Very, yeah, very interesting that. And because, triggers, I mean, triggers
Yeah,
just they arise from many, many different dynamics and different relationships and experiences. And it's how we manage them. And I just find like even if, we are healed, we're still gonna get triggered, it's just a fact of life. We're
exactly.
humans. So,
Yeah. Like
and
the world isn't super kind and gentle and soft. There are going to be things that hurt us, and we can't get rid of all of those, but we do
exactly.
need compassion when those things come up and we are hurt or traumatized by a trigger.
Oh God, the memories. Oh my goodness,
Yeah,
and the emotions which were associated with certain, bad events that might have happened to us, they were all still there. They don't disappear. So it's how we manage them and it's how long we choose to stay in a triggered state. For example, for me, that's been the greatest kind of result of healing is the fact that, I just don't stay in those triggered states for long anymore, you
yeah,
know.
it's
And
similar to my experience. Like I'm much more able to, yes, I'm still triggered, but I don't spend weeks in that triggered space. Or, I used to spend months at a time completely dissociated from my own body. And
yeah.
now I'm much more able, if I start to dissociate, I recognize it and I'm able to pull myself back.
Mm.
But in order to do those things, we need people to still be supportive and not just be dismissing our trauma and say, why aren't you over this yet?
Yeah, exactly. Just get over it. Just move on. It's like, no, not that easy. And
Exactly.
which is why these discussions are so important to
Yes,
remind people of that. So,
absolutely.
so for listeners who want to be part of the solution, where should they start?
Ooh. I think the number one is to listen to and support survivors that you do know. Check in. Obviously, we don't want to talk about our trauma all the time, but maybe think about the fact that we are still living with this for a long time. It's not just because we told you once and had a conversation with you once doesn't mean that we never need to speak to you about it again. Um, but I think more broadly, we all need to be challenging the things that are contributing to violence against women and girls and the epidemic that it is. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to dismiss the fact that childhood sexual abuse and sexual violence happens to men, but we have to admit that the vast majority of victims are women and the vast majority of perpetrators are men. And I think in order to really see change, we need to reframe the conversation from violence against women and girls to male perpetrated violence against women and girls. Um, I think we need to be having more honest conversations about where this is coming from and start challenging it on a cultural level. I was speaking to someone, I was interviewing someone this morning, Jamie Klingler from Reclaim the Street, who was saying she wants to get to a point where when a man makes a comment in a car of like a group of other guys, the other guys go, get out the car. Like I want to, and I agree with her. I want to get to a point where we are all challenging this, and it's not just women. I want everyone of all genders and identities to understand that sexual violence affects all of us. It's not just, a woman problem. It's not just a man problem. It's something that we can only solve as a collective. Um, and I think too often people will kind of absolve themselves of any responsibility because they think, oh, well, it hasn't happened to me and I've never done it to anyone else, so why do I need to be involved in this conversation? And to them, I would encourage them to look at the pyramid of sexual violence against women and girls and understand that it starts with sexist comments and sexist jokes, and it goes all the way up into violence. And I think until we're more ready to have those conversations and understand that all of us play a role, we're not going to make the progress that we need. So yeah, so I think support and believe survivors and play your part because all of us have a part to play.
You really do. Wow,
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, your insights have been incredible and really thought-provoking. So thank you so much. And
Thank you for
so,
having me.
yeah, where can my listeners read your articles and follow your work?
Yes. So you can find me on, I have a website now, finally. Took
Like,
me 6 years of being freelance, but I finally have a website. hannahshewanstevens.co.uk, or I'm on Instagram, my full name, or I'm on Twitter, sorry, X. Ugh. My full name. Um, and I plan to be, it's my goal this year as well to be posting a lot more about discussion. I've been a bit of a social media phobe for a long time, and I'm now trying to kind of challenge myself to talk more about these things and get my voice out there because I think all of our voices matter. So yeah, and I always also say to people as well, if there's a topic that you think needs covering, reach out to me. I love hearing from people. I love hearing what people think needs to be talked about, and helping people to platform those issues. So yeah.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of topics for discussion. So everybody, please do reach out to Hannah and share, any topics that may be of interest. And I'm sure Hannah will enjoy hearing from you all. And so you're on Instagram now
Yeah.
and you're on Facebook.
Facebook, not really.
Okay.
It's Facebook, sorry, Instagram and X. And I have a
Excellent.
TikTok account that I haven't posted anything on yet. So maybe just
No
look at
problem.
Instagram and X for now.
That's
Or
cool.
check me out on my website where my email is.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll be adding all the links for you. And so, again, I really do thank you for your courage as well in actually bringing these topics to light. I just think it takes a certain person to do that. And you have definitely been placed on this earth to do that. So I salute you, my friend. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
I salute you right back because you're doing it too.
I know. Amazing. But yeah, that's all we have time for today, my beautiful listeners. We hope you enjoyed the show. And again, if you have any questions about anything that we discussed today, we always love to hear from you. And until the next episode, take care, stay blessed. We love you.